Brothers and sisters, God bless you. This is Pastor Ambrose Carroll with Green the Church, and I'm here to let you know that the race is on. Listen, we are excited today on our weekly podcast to have my friend and brother, Dr. Anthony Kinslow, here with us from the Gemini Energy Solutions. And you all know at Green the Church, we try to make sure that we really talk about the holistic nature of what it means to be, as I call it, a revivalist. What does it mean to care about the environment? What does it mean to understand sustainability as stewardship? And we are so pleased to be able to bring you some of the best voices to the day when it comes to the holistic nature of this work. As you all know, our three pillars center around amplifying green liberation theology, promoting sustainable practices, and building power for political and economic change. Well, today we get to cover two of those pillars. First of all, we're looking at the sustainable practice of renewable energy. But at the same time, we're talking about building power for both political and economic change. And I'm so very glad to have Dr. Kinslow here with us. He is a graduate of North Carolina A&T. He did his master's and doctoral level work at Stanford University. He is an engineer by trade, but he is one who cares for both the planet and people. And glad to have you today. Just say hello to us today in your own way.
How's it going, everybody? Great to be on this podcast. It's always enjoyable for me to be on the call with you, Reverend Ambrose. Just the week in, week out conversations that we have, it just brings some joy to my life always. So thank you for having me.
Man, fantastic, man. And again, thanks so much for taking some time with us today. So, man, tell us your story. How did you come to have an interest in solar and the environment?
Yeah, thanks. So it all started for me when I was in high school and I watched An Inconvenient Truth. And it's probably a lot of folks in my generation that really clicked for them. But for me, I was always taught by my family, my mom and dad, that we have to make an impact on our community. And I just didn't know how I was going to make that impact. And watching An Inconvenient Truth, for me, that it just laid it all out. Like, this was what I was going to do with my life. This is how I was going to have an impact. And, you know, I also came at it from a naive standpoint of, oh, this is going to bring everybody together. Right. I thought everybody was going to be on the same page with this. As we see now, 20 plus years later, that is not the case. And one of the reasons why the work we're all doing is so critical to this.
Yeah, man, I like what you said about the notion of bringing us all together. For me, from a spiritual standpoint, we often look at what is it that we all have in common in this world where there's so much war, there's so much distress. But looking at this environmental piece, this big tent piece, as something larger than any of us that could possibly bring us together is definitely a part of how I trek it. Tell me a little bit about your faith. Like, what were your roots in the church, and has your faith had an impact, as it does with me, on how you see these issues?
Yeah, so I grew up Southern Baptist, originally born in Nashville, Tennessee. My great uncle has a church out in Winchester, Tennessee. My godparents, my godfather has a church in High Point, North Carolina. So the church has always been a part of my life. Even in high school, if my mom had to work on a Sunday, I would go to church by myself. So it was definitely something for me. My faith in the community of the church has always been critical to my development. From a youth, everybody on my football team, we all went to the same church in Baltimore where I grew up. When I was going through hard times, my mom passed when I was 18, the day I was supposed to start college, right? It was my faith that kept me like sane, quite frankly, and kept me moving. So the idea of being able to bring my knowledge and the solutions that I'm developing to the church is just a great comfort to me to know that like everything that the church has done for me and my family, that I can give back in some way, in addition to tithes and offerings, right?
That's right. Now, in addition, but go ahead and pay your tithes and offerings.
Yeah, but no, I was a trustee at my home church and during grad school, University Amy Zion. So I've, attended Amy Zion Baptist, non-denominational. Like I've attended a whole range of churches as I've moved around and lived in different places. But it's always been making sure that I find my church family, find my church home, and really, I have 2 little ones now, and it's about bringing them into that too, because I recognize the value of that growing up.
Wow, man, that's awesome. I definitely believe that the church gives us a firm foundation and a sense of community. And I so very much appreciate your narrative and, sharing how, the church helps us with real struggle, individually, but then it helps us to learn how to give back to the community as a whole. Man, so you were in Baltimore, and then for college, you decide to go south towards North Carolina. I guess that's not too far from Baltimore.
Keep right.
So how'd you end up out of all of the schools? I mean, you could have gone to Florida Memorial College like I did. You know what I mean? You could have chosen to go to. Why did you end up going to North Carolina A&T? And tell us about, how you ended up going from playing football to majoring in engineering. Come on, somebody, help me out, man. My head.
So, growing up, I played all types of sports: basketball, soccer. I actually wanted to play basketball in college, and that was part of my decisioning point, was where I could play basketball in college at the time. But I went to a private school in Baltimore. My mom went to Morgan State University.
Okay.
And so every homecoming we would be at Morgan State homecoming. So I knew about Morgan State. I actually didn't know about A&T growing up. And so we were touring colleges in North Carolina, UNC, Duke, Elon, and then my mom's friends like, oh, there's there's an engineering school down in Greensboro you should check out.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't even know it was an HBCU until I showed up. And so for me, I got there and I was just like, oh, this is it right here. And so a lot of my cohort went to private liberal arts schools in the Northeast or a few Ivy Leagues. And I think I definitely chose the best by going to A&T.
All right.
But yeah, I wasn't
2 A&T cats out here listening.
But yeah, no, A&T was a blessing for me. My great uncle, Melvin Ramey, Dr. Melvin Ramey, was one of the first Black professors at UC Davis. Okay. And he did civil engineering. So when I was looking at colleges, his thing was, you like people and you like math, so why don't you do engineering? And
wow,
I loved the life they had. Yeah. I loved visiting them in the summers, and I was like, okay, that was I didn't have to ask any more questions. All right, that's what I'm gonna do, civil engineering. Wow. And so that's kind of how I ended up in that space.
Man, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I know per capita, there's probably not a lot. I know there are a lot of us in engineering per capita. When you step back and look at it nationally, though, you're among the few. And then from there, you moved, and how'd you get into Stanford, and what was that like, man, moving as an African-American kid coming from an HBCU into that environment? Yeah,
no, when I got the email that I got into Stanford, I was jumping up and down on my bed. I was so excited. I was like, yes, this is it. And my family was super excited because more than one of my families had that as their dream school for grad school.
Right.
And I was the one to do it. But getting there, it was really tough. And not because of the academics. What was tough was that being the only one and not being embraced was the real challenge for me, because at A&T, and I'm sure most of the HBCUs, it's a lot of community, right? We're getting through this together, right? Late Sundays all together in the engineering room, just like helping each other out with homework, make sure everybody is going to get as best they can. Yeah. Right. That's how I was brought into this engineering space. That's how I thought engineers acted and were supposed to act. That's how fellow students were supposed to act. Right. And then you get there and it was very, this group here, you know, folks from China would be together, folks from South America would be together, white Americans would be together. It was very grouped. And I had more than one professor force that groups apart by saying you have to be in a group, like in class, you have to sit down with someone who's from a different country or from a different continent, right? Like that was an active thing to do to try and break that up. But I mean, my fellow Americans weren't sitting with me, and now my brothers on this, right? And so it wasn't even like my first year, I was the only Black person in class, whether Black American or otherwise.
Okay.
More as over the 5 years, 6 years at Stanford, you know, I had some master's students come through from some HBCUs. And I was really heavy with recruiting from HBCUs in the School of Engineering, because I was like, I'm not going to be the only one here forever.
Wow.
But that was the hardest part about transitioning to Stanford, was just the lack of community that was there within my discipline, right?
Yeah.
Stanford does have Black folks at Stanford. The undergrads are about 10% of the population.
Okay.
They have a strong history of activism within the Black community at Stanford. But when you're in grad school, you kind of get isolated. You're in your own channel, your own spaces. And so it was really difficult finding that community at first, and how to incorporate that in my day-to-day life.
Wow. Well, listen, I think I was going to say it's exciting, but I think it's that pioneer spirit, you know, for us to hear it, though, even in 2023, it's not as easy for some of us to really get it together. You know, for those of us who attended HBCUs on all levels and never had to live in that world, you know, thank you for sharing, and thank you for persevering. Thank you for making it, and making it well, and representing both your family and the culture. And I really like what you said. You made sure that you were recruiting to make sure that others were coming behind you. I think this is significant to this conversation around what it means to be a revivalist, someone who's interested in the environment, interested in sustainable practices, because if we're going to save this planet, right, we need our young people moving and really understanding STEM, really embracing science and technology, right? Engineering, mathematics, right? Because this is a part of what it's going to take to make the change. And while we pray that God does the miraculous and does those pieces, God is also equipping our young people, giving us the mind, giving us the calling, even to these kind of pursuits. And I think that your story, Dr. Kinslow, is one that lets my children and others know that it can be done. So just thank you again for that. Now, tell us, there are a few of us in this field then. So talk about how you've overcome being in rooms. You just talked about how you've overcome being in rooms where you're the only Black person. But then how did you move from that, you know, that broad base of civil engineering, then understanding kind of the environmental piece? How and why did you move into this environmental piece? Because being the only one says that in some instances that there are a lot of plush offices that you could move into. Like there are a lot of other things that you could do in the world with your time, right? Other than saying that I'm going to attempt to help marginalized communities. So tell me what moved you into your current work, and tell me a little bit about Gemini Energy Solutions and some of the other pieces that you have now, and how did those pieces come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, though, to start by saying, when I was at A&T, there was a lot of folks interested in the environment and doing work in the environmental space and sustainability. And so for me, it was never an aspect of us not being in this space. Okay. It wasn't until I got to Stanford and I was the only one that I was like, oh, wait, I was in a nice bubble. And the industry as a whole got a real problem, right? You start going to conferences and you're like, wait a second.
Different conversation.
Everybody knows me because I'm the only one. I like to think it's because I got a dynamic personality, but
Right. Right.
but my master's and PhD was in the Sustainable Design and Construction program. And so the focus of the whole program was sustainable design and construction of the built environment. So that could be bridges, buildings, roads, all of this. So it really, and I really gravitate to buildings in particular. My PhD focused on residential buildings. My company, Gemini Energy Solutions, focuses on commercial buildings. All right. So like my expertise is around how do we design buildings and construct them to be net zero energy, to be net positive energy, where you're actually generating more energy than you need. And you could put that back to other people or the grid. That's my specialty. That's what I was at school for 6 years for. And so that really just crafted me into finding my ways. And it wasn't a clear like, oh, this is what I want to do. It was very much try this. I tried doing automation of construction scheduling to reduce the pollution that occurs during construction, right? If you can reduce that. I did water. I did behavior, looking at energy efficiency behavior. So I touched on all these different aspects, but what I settled down was I wanted to be an enabler. I recognize that even if I'm recruiting folks for Stanford, not everybody can go to a grad school. Not everybody is supposed to be going to college. That's right. There's other ways to make an impact. There's other ways to do well in life. Sure. And so I wanted to enable those who didn't have the required credentials to become a certified energy auditor or a certified energy manager, because you need 4-year degree, 5 years of experience, pay $2,000 to take the test. Like all these things were barriers.
Right.
I wanted to develop something that would remove those barriers for our community and allow others to be making impactful work in this clean energy space without having to go to college, without having to pay $2,000 just to take a test, right? Like and so that's what I started Gemini Energy Solutions, was to be that enabler. The purpose of Gemini is, as a clean technology company, is to develop technology that enables and opens up the clean energy space to everyone, so that non-technical people can be completing technical jobs.
Man, that's awesome. And to that degree, and I think that's part and partial how we met, because we've been trying to find a way to enable the Black church, right, to really begin to work in this space and move. And it's because of your technology and your vision, even to begin to talk about clean energy hubs in a way where churches could have microgrids, I found fascinating. So talk a little bit about clean energy hubs and some of the stuff that we are fortunate to partner together in.
Yeah, so thanks. The concept of the clean energy hub is our original concept was community anchors that are trusted by their community, active in the community, and own their own property within the community, can bring clean technology to bear: solar, EV charging, batteries, electric vehicles, all this to bear on that property, and then become a catalyst to transform the rest of the community by generating revenue with that hub that can then be used to allow everyone else to be a part of this, right?
Right.
And the obvious example is no one wants to buy an electric vehicle if there's no place to charge.
Right.
In most of our communities, there's no place to charge. So the community anchor puts in the charge stations at their place. Now you have a place to charge, a place you already visit and you trust to go charge. That's safe, right? That community anchor is generating revenue, but that revenue staying in the community, as opposed to third parties who would put a charging station there, charge whatever they want, charge a premium really, because they don't believe we care about this stuff.
Right.
And that money goes right out of the community. And so I saw this as an opportunity to create a regenerative economy within our communities at the census tract, the zip code level, right? We talk about scale, but we often think of scales like this high in the sky, everyone just all of a sudden gets it, as opposed to what place-based solutions do we need that we can scale up? And so that's really the idea behind the Clean Energy Hub. And I just got to say, we were very open to any type of nonprofit, but the Black church stepped up. The Black church said, no, this is what we want to do. And so people are like, oh, do you only work with churches? It's like, no, we work with any community anchor, but it's the Black church is like, they taking it. And so that's been really great. And our engagement was like just, the epitome of that example of like the Black church wanting to be a leader in this.
Yeah, most definitely. And we, praise God for our communities, whether it is the community center, whether it's the YMCA, whether it's some of our, some of our governmental agencies that have place and space in community. The work that Gemini Energy Solutions does can be helpful, and it can enable the community to get the projects done, but it also empowers people in the community through workforce development, sharing skills. As Dr. Kinslow said, not everybody working in clean tech is going to graduate from Stanford, but that does not mean that you cannot have a living wage job in clean tech, right? Because of some of the work that Dr. Kinslow is doing. And so it is open to all of our community players. I live in West Oakland, California right now, across the street at Hoover Elementary School. They are building solar carports. They're going to have electric vehicle charging because this is happening in our communities. But without having players like Dr. Kinslow at this level, we won't benefit from it as much. And so from the standpoint of the Black church, we are so pleased. You talk about leaders coming in. I'm always enamored at the work of Bishop Jerry Macklin and the Glad Tidings Church of God in Christ, which is an international church. And Bishop Macklin plays a very strong part in its leadership. Talk to us a little bit, Dr. Kinslow, about that project and projects that we have going on in different parts of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you remember, our first time being called on an event together was you brought me in to speak to Black churches with the city of Berkeley on electrification within the city of Berkeley.
Yes.
And so Bishop Macklin was actually on that call.
Right.
And I started off, of course, talking about my home church, University of Amy Zion.
Yeah.
And so after the call, he calls up his old friend who also goes to University of Amy Zion. He said, this young man says he goes there. Do you know him? Is he for real? Is he really talking about this stuff? And Bill Green, him and Loretta Green, they kind of adopted me when I moved out to California, family, friends. So, and then they laugh because they're like, usually we invite people up, we say, come on over anytime. Very few students actually do it. And so, yeah, they're the ones who brought me to my church, introduced me to that family, that community. And so, yeah, him, Bishop Macklin and Bill Green were just chatting, and he was like, yeah, he's for real. And so that's actually why Glad Tidings was willing to move that with us, right? They had already been talking about this mindset, this work, because of the Green to Church and that engagement with you. But why they chose us to be the ones that they move with in partnership with y'all was because of that relationship. Which is so funny. Back to what has the church, right? Like if I had just gone to school and then like, oh, I can do church afterwards, none of this would have happened. So that was really exciting. But they are stepping up. Not only are they the first, they are also the ones who are saying everything we develop, we want to share with all the other churches.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want to do this unless we're doing it where everybody else can benefit from it. And I think that's a powerful statement. And it's the type of energy and heart that we need all of our leaders to be coming to this with, because we don't have time for everybody to relearn it each time. We don't have time, nor does our community have the money for that. Right.
That's right.
And so, we've been developing this process. It was not easy. It's been over 2 years that we've been doing this work with them. And now, construction is scheduled to be completed in March. That's going to be 2.5 years to do this. But because of the work with them, the next phase, the next group is 9 months. instead of 2.5 years. The group after that, maybe it'd be even faster, right? Like, so
Yeah.
we've learned working with them, and their willingness, their effort has been a great help for everybody who comes after them.
That's right.
Now, one of the big things that we're working on is, of course, the Georgia 100 initiative.
All right.
Yes. So Dr. Reverend Ambrose Carroll here went down to have and spoke at a conference. What was that? The Proctor?
That was the National Conference of Black Churches.
Okay, so the National Conference of Black Churches, he talked about the work we're doing at Glad Tidings, et cetera. And then Brother James Gamon over at University of Miami's 6th District said, oh, we got to do that here.
Right.
And so, we have been really working with partners throughout Georgia around workforce development, right? Training folks in the community to be the ones that are data collecting for this work, and then training them on implementation and then maintenance of these hubs, right? So the whole kind of think of it as an escalator. You get on and you're going all the way to the top, right? We're working with community partners around congregate engagement around this, right? We're working with contractors, Black contractors and Black solar developers and Black HVAC folks and Black engineers, all bringing the community in here for this initiative of doing at least 100 churches throughout Georgia, clean energy hubs, right? This is at the scale that no one else is doing. I think it's important to understand that on a microgrid level, if a company does a few, 10, 12 in a year, that's a really good year. We're talking about 100 as a pilot. This is a pilot because we recognize doing 100 at a time won't get to the goal. And so I love Green Church. I said, what are we going to do for next year? He's like, well, we should at least do 2,000.
That's right.
This pilot of 100 is for the practice of 2,000 in 2024. And so the partners we're developing in this, all this is going as we are the technical support for Green to Church, right? Like, so all this is a Green to Church initiative. This vision of 2,000 churches is coming from Green to Church. And so for me to be able to be a part of that and to enable that is so exciting. The use of our technology, in particular our platform Conserve, which allows for anybody to be a data collector, to develop a feasibility study. I mean, this is a 60-page document that is developed by a church administrator because of the work that they did, right? That is a game changer. And so we're really excited to be able to be a part of it. And this is history. Like this is game changing on so many levels.
Brothers and sisters, you've heard it. Dr. Anthony Kinslow himself. This is game changing. This is the cutting edge of ministry in 2023, 2024. And we just believe you ought to come on and be a part of it. There's so much out there. And let me say, like, these things are possible and plausible because of the work that you all have been doing with organizations like Green the Church over the years, fighting for clean air and clean water, going to Washington, D.C., lobbying, for the Green New Deal, fighting against Trump's appointees to the EPA. We had to boot Pruitt, we've been out here battling. But because of the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and other things that have been done in the Biden administration, a lot of these things are now possible because of the Justice 40 mantra, that 40% of billions of dollars are now coming to our communities. We are readying, making sure that we're able to bring our fair share. And we believe that the Black church, these institutions founded by our grandparents who sold chicken dinners and sweet potato pie, are one of the largest assets in our communities, but it's also a gift and a treasure given, and that we have to be good stewards over. And I just applaud again, Dr. Kinslow, listening to the very call of God on these issues, to be called to do this kind of work for such a time as this. Sometimes we see these things in motion and we understand that, you got these engineers and people coming, putting these plans together, but understand that when Dr. Kinslow started this company, the Inflation Reduction Act was not a thing, right? You have to understand that people have been moving in faith, and that we are at a point that is ordained, we believe, by what is divine. And again, so very glad to have you on to tell your story. And again, like I tell you all, the race is on. And Green the Church is about resilience. It's about what it means to have an Aboriginal context. It's about courage, and it's about empowerment. The race is on. Our time is now. We don't have time to sit on the sideline. We don't have time not to partner with others. The time is now. All right, let me see. All right, Dr. Kinslow, again, thank you. Give us some closing words and some wisdom. What do you think, and how do you think this work will benefit future generations?
So I'll start by saying, if future generations have to put in the work we're putting in now, then it's too late. I want everybody to understand that. If my kids 3 and 1 years old need to be putting in work into the environment like we're trying to put in work to the environment, then we better have some moon landings or something, because
it's gonna be over.
It's over, right? I mean, right now, today, we need a miracle from God, plus all of our hard work for this for this to happen. And that's the science of it. And so for me, the work that we're doing benefits future generations in a few ways. The first is we're developing a model where communities no longer are solely dependent on grants and philanthropy to implement solutions they know will help their people, right? The second is because we are doing this at such a scale, we are also improving Black businesses who are doing great work, but have up until now not had the demand or the ability to grow and expand and to hire more people. And so we're working hand in hand with these contractors and others that this is the level of demand that's coming down. This is the scale that we're working on. What do you need from us so that you can grow your business as well, right? So we're talking about new jobs, Black entrepreneurship, that will be in there to hire folks who care about this. The people will now be able to see themselves in these spaces and places. And lastly, I mean, fundamentally, I've been seeing a lot of images about kind of futurism and green cities. And I want to create, right today, Black communities are the most unhealthiest communities. They have the most pollution, soil, water, and air.
That's right.
Like, I want that to be the opposite for our next generation. I want our communities to be the cleanest cities, right? The healthiest cities. I want that to be what our next generation is looking at and growing into, is that no longer are we only seeing concrete jungles, but greenery and beauty and fresh fruits and produce, no more food deserts, right? Like all this is interconnected. And I see the clean energy hubs as just one part of the solution, but an important one because it provides revenue for these other efforts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a critical piece. We're working on developing solutions and ownership for these Black churches, for these community anchors, to have revenue to then put into solutions that they know are necessary and critical to their community. So
I think that's awesome, man, and needed to say, because a lot of times we think about getting solar or getting EV chargers as a way to lower our utility bill. And while that may be true, what Dr. Kinslow and Green the Church is offering these congregations or what he calls revenue generating microgrids. That means that there's a way for our churches to increase revenue over and above tithes and offerings. And I think that's an important piece. And as we really do this, we're really looking at the industry itself and looking at our participation as a people. This is really huge. And so if you're listening, you're on the trustee board, you're a choir member, tell somebody on the trustee board. Come on, somebody. Talk with your pastor. This is the time for us to get involved. And it does not matter if your church is a great cathedral or a storefront or anything in between, you have a place and a space in community, and this is an opportunity to take righteous advantage of these opportunities. This has been fantastic, man. Listen, this has been so great. I don't think we can do it all in one sitting. Dr. Kinslow, will you come back again?
Oh, of course, of course.
All right, come back, bring some more of your friends. Listen, I think we'll have some more pastors on over the next few weeks, some more scientists, some more engineers. We have to talk about this. We have to get in front of it. And we're so very thankful. Again, any closing words, Doc?
No, just I'm excited. I'm really excited. This moment in time is great to be alive today with all this happening. So thank you for having me. And to everyone listening, please don't miss this opportunity.
All right. You've heard it, brothers and sisters. And remember, the race is on. God bless you. And God keep you.